a million, you're a gem, shine when the light grows dim. Sing 1, 2, 3, 4. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it. We got the right stuff, we put the hammer right down. Wanna be like us, you better stick around. If you want it, you gotta prove it. Like we do it, like we do it. Dun, 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 dun.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join us today for our panel, The Promise of the Future of Space. I'm Lisa Callahan, the Vice President and General Manager of Commercial Civil Space within Lockheed Martin, and I have one of the coolest jobs. I lead a team of amazing women and men who build and operate spacecraft that provide bandwidth to connect the world, provide early warning weather data to protect life and property, and allow humans and robots to explore our solar system and unlock the secrets of the universe. I'm also the honorary chair of the World Space Week Association events honoring women in space, and it's my privilege to host today's conversation. As you may know, we're nearing the end of Women's History Month, and we have some fantastic women from the space industry joining us today to share their perspectives and engage in a great dialogue. For today's event, I will introduce each panelist and ask them to share a little bit more about their background before we get into our program. And we'll save a few minutes at the end for some of the questions that we've received on social media. And if we have time, we'll take questions as we go from you all live. There is a Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom window that you can ask these questions. So I'll start with Sean Cleaver. I'll let you start first. You're currently working as the industrial manager for the Orion European Service Module at Airbus Defense and Space Business in Bremen, Germany. And you're the former Women in Science and Engineering Youth Professional Board Chair. Please share a little bit more about your background and your organization that you're representing.
Okay, thank you very much, Lisa. So yes, I work for Airbus Defence and Space in Bremen in Germany, although I actually started off at Airbus back in the UK. So I work in the space systems part of the business, and we basically help to design, develop and build all sorts of different types of satellites and spacecraft, mostly for either telecommunications customers or for the European Space Agency. So we're building spacecraft that can do anything from monitoring the Earth's climate, observing and collecting data about the sun, for example, and even creating rovers to go and explore Mars. So I really call myself a spacecraft engineer, really, because I've done lots of different roles on all sorts of different missions in my time at Airbus. But yes, you mentioned there my involvement with WISE, so Women in Science and Engineering, which is a UK-based organisation. I'm really passionate about encouraging the next generation of scientists and engineers into STEM careers. So a few years ago, I chaired the WISE Young Professionals Board, and WISE is really all about trying to get more women into STEM careers and also retain those women once they get there. So I've done lots of stuff about promoting diversity and inclusion, particularly when it comes to gender, and I do a lot of outreach with school children where I can, and I love doing that. I love going to schools and talking about space and all the exciting things that are happening in the UK and in Europe, and really making them realise that they can be part of this too.
Well, Sean, thank you so much, and that I am so appreciative of the work that you're doing in STEM and with women and girls. That's critically important to our future, and I think we would all on this panel agree with you and what you're doing there. So thank you. The next up is Susan Moribana. You're the managing director of the Traveling Telescope Africa Ltd, based in Kenya, and the World Space Week Associate Board member. Susan, please give the audience a little bit more about you and your background and the organization you're representing.
So I run the Traveling Telescope, which is an outreach company and we try to engage as many kids as we can, giving them a chance to look at the telescope, because it's been around for more than 400 years and so many people haven't had a chance to look through one. And we think that this can really spark interest in science and STEM. In addition to that, we also promote Kenya as an astrotourism site through our company. And we've been lucky to work with the Minister of Tourism here in the country. We've also traveled to Tanzania promoting astronomy as a tourism destination, but also with kids in schools. So in the region, we're trying to really get people excited about science, but really trying to reach everyone. I got into astronomy not very early in my career, but I was lucky to be involved in it. And I really saw how astronomy is a really good tool to get kids excited about science or just to question. And that's why we set up the Traveling Telescope.
That's really exciting. It's so wonderful to hear that globally, everybody is so interested in getting children involved in science. I'm just so excited about that. Okay, the next up is Maruska Strah. You're the Executive Director for World Space Week Association. So first, I'd like to thank you for everything you've done to help us put this event on today. You're also based in Vienna, Austria, pursuing a PhD in legal studies and have an interest in space traffic management. We'd love to hear more about your background in your organization as well, Maruska.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for this kind introduction. And also thank you for being our World Space Week 2021 Honorary Chair. You and your team have been an incredible support.
Thank you.
We in the World Space Week Association are a non-governmental, non-profit organization, and we are coordinating a UN declared event, World Space Week, which is an annual celebration of space happening every year between 4 and 10 of October. For example, in 2019, we recorded over 8,000 events in 96 countries. We saw a decline in 2020, but consequently saw an incredible increase in numbers of virtual events. And because participation was somehow easier because of the virtual nature of these events, we saw many high-level events and conferences happening all around. And I'm certain that in 2021, we're going to see this increase of a combination of in-person and virtual events happening globally during that week. And we would be very, very happy if everyone on this panel and webinar also join us in these activities. What we do, basically, what our board of directors every year does is select a team around which we are organizing our activities and programs. In 2021, this team is Women in Space. This team is very close to my heart, and our goal this year is to empower, not only talk about women in space and raise awareness, even though this is extremely important, but rather identify the obstacles women are facing when entering space sector and STEM fields. And what is most important, how do we overcome these obstacles? To do that, we are planning a series of webinars, such as this one, a podcast, and several other activities with a goal of raising profiles of women and also showcasing role models for the generations to come. And here I have to say that thank you, ladies, here for being role models to all of us, including myself. And I'm incredibly grateful that I can talk to you all about this topic. And yes, in 2022, in next year, we still don't know what the theme will be, and please, stay involved with us to see what we're gonna be discussing next year. I will definitely remain involved in activities around women in space, because this is something I'll be doing until actual equality is achieved. But as you mentioned, and I thank you for that, my doctoral research will be dedicated to space traffic management and how we implement the long-term sustainability guidelines as adopted by the UN. It's my personal belief that sustainability, both of our planet and outer space, are crucial for survival of us and our planet and our environment. So I want to dedicate my career to that topic.
Well, that's a really exciting topic and something that's definitely going to be needed in terms of space traffic management and what we do, as there are more and more companies getting involved in space, which is very exciting to me as well. So thank you all for those brief introductions. Really excited to get to know you even better with some of the questions that we have for you. So the first set of questions I'm going to ask to all the panelists, and we'll just kind of go one by one. But the first question is really about, how did you get into aerospace? And what has your journey been so far? Susan, why don't we start with you?
Thank you. So I did my first degree in economics. And while I was studying economics, I met a group of grad students who are traveling across Africa teaching science, and with a telescope. And I revisited my early years in school when I loved science. And lucky for me, it wasn't very practical. And being with these people, I really wanted to share that. So I got into outreach, and later studied in astronomy, and wanted to give that to kids. And because I felt and I saw the impact of what this group of grad students were doing at that time. And I always think I was lucky. I was at the right place at the right time. And I fell in love with the science I once loved in school. So tried a few different things, and then eventually set up the traveling telescope about 8 years ago with my husband and partner. And we've been traveling and reached so many kids all over the country. About 4 years ago, we partnered with Airbus Foundation, and we do run a robotics program. We've been running a robotics program in schools until 2020, when the pandemic hit, and we couldn't physically visit schools, and we couldn't share the kits. But it was also just expanding our narrative, because when you take the telescope to a school, or when you talk about astronomy, it only feels like all you're trying to do is look up in the sky. Whereas there's much more than that. There's obviously the engineers who build the telescopes, the computer scientists who have the data, the communicators. And this is what we wanted to show the kids. So the addition with our partnership with Airbus Foundation helped us, demystify what we do more, and give kids a chance to be part of the space industry, irrespective of what careers they choose. So we've had young kids tell us they want to be engineers, and then they see, rockets, for example. They're like, well, I want to build a rocket, and that's very exciting to see that.
That's awesome. I'm so excited to see that you have adapted so quickly in the COVID environment and are still able to address children and to talk to them about things even beyond showing them that telescope. So that's awesome. Thank you. Sian, how about you?
Yeah, so if I go back right to the beginning, then I've always been fascinated by space. And I always knew that I wanted to work in the space industry, although actually when I was a child, I was more interested in the astronomy side of things. So I would have loved to have had a look through Susan's telescope. Yeah, so I really didn't know much about the kind of engineering roles that were on offer at that age. So I went on to study physics and astronomy at Durham University in the UK. And then straight after that, I applied to the Airbus Defence and Space Graduate Scheme that they have in the UK, because it was really the only company that I knew of that was working on really exciting science and exploration missions. So I suddenly went from being a physicist to an engineer kind of almost overnight, which terrified me a bit at first because I didn't have any formal training as an engineer. But actually, I think if you study something as pure as physics or any other science, then it's not actually a huge leap to apply what you've learned to engineering. And in fact, I think a lot of physicists end up as engineers because really engineering is just the application of science. So I've been at Airbus about 9 years now. I've been involved in design and development of all sorts of different missions, mostly for the European Space Agency. And I've done a lot of jobs in that time. I've done a bit of systems engineering. I've worked on bids to win future work. I've done project management. And most recently, I've become an industrial manager, which is a really nice combination of both the technical side of things and also the project management side of things. And yeah, I really love what I do. I work at Airbus Bremen now on the European service module for Orion. And I'm sure you'll agree with me, Lisa, it is the coolest project. It is really a really special project to be involved with. And we're basically building part of a spacecraft that's going to take astronauts back to the moon again in just a few years' time from now, which completely blows my mind whenever I think about it. And it's a really great project to be a part of. So yeah, I love working in the space industry.
Yeah, Sean, I completely agree with you. Orion is an outstanding program to be a part of, and we really appreciate the European Space Agency and Airbus in developing the European service module for us. Really excited to watch Orion fly later this year, early next year, uncrewed, but in preparation for those crewed missions. So thank you.
So exciting.
Maruska, tell us a little bit about how you got into aerospace.
I read one chapter on international space law in a textbook during my master's studies and fell in love, and it was love at first sight, and we're still growing strong together. No separation in the future. I never in my life imagined that I'll be working with outer space because I was one of those kids who are incredibly and notoriously bad at math and consequently bad at science. So no one really encouraged me to pursue that side of possible academic careers because it just brought me no pleasure, no joy. So I always focused on languages and history and how you work with people, which is why I studied international relations. And during that time, discovered international space law. And it was an interesting path because I'm coming from a country with no space agency, and I was led to believe, as you know, as a student, that unless you're an engineer or a scientist, what are you going to do with space? Which until today serves as a motivation every day, basically, because there are so many professions and so many fields where we have to work together to actually be successful in the space sector. So after that, I kind of looked into different ways of how I would make this happen somehow, even though it didn't really seem likely at that time. And I applied for an internship with the UN Office for Outer Space Affairs, got selected, and 3 years later, here we are today. Very happy and looking forward to the bright future of outer space technologies and activities and everything that we're all doing together.
That's awesome. I love your story because you don't have an engineering and science background, but yet you are involved very much so in the space industry. And I think as we look to the future and work to become an interplanetary species potentially, there's going to be people in every domain possible that are going to need to get involved in space. And your interest in space traffic management, I think, is just super critical at this time. And so it's exciting to hear your story and how you've approached this. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit. I wanted to hear a little bit more about your career and talk about how mentors have played a role in your career. So I know for me personally, I've had mentors throughout my career, and I know that mentors are critically important, particularly to women, to build our confidence and to kind of push us to go try new assignments and things. So I'm curious though, how has mentors impacted your career, and why do you think they're so important? So for the women and young ladies that are maybe listening, what's your thoughts on mentorship? Sean, why don't we start with you?
Okay, yeah, so absolutely. Mentorship, I think, is so important. I actually think that the best mentors have been, for me, have been those that have come about a bit more organically rather than somebody who you're matched with, let's say. So for example, a colleague who becomes more of a friend and who you start to bounce ideas off and take advice from. I can think of a few of those sorts of people in my life, and they've really been so valuable to me. Because I'm always quite interested in hearing the opinions of other people. And when somebody's more experienced and maybe been through the same things that you have, then their advice, I think, is really golden. And actually, even at my sort of relatively early phase of career, I seem to have fallen into the role of a mentor myself as well. So a few years ago, I was working with a graduate who I just got on really well with. We were fairly similar in age anyway. I saw a lot of myself in her, and actually we became good friends, but kind of with a mentor-mentee kind of relationship. She'd drop me messages telling me all these exciting things she'd been doing, and sometimes she'd ask for advice. And it kind of took me back a bit, actually, at first, when I kind of realized that she looked up to me in some sort of way. But I really like to pay it forward and to help other people. And actually, I think we really both benefited, because I could share anecdotes or advice to help her out. And in return, she pointed out the things that I just hadn't noticed about myself, things that she saw in me that I hadn't seen myself. So it really gave me a lot of energy. I loved seeing her confidence grow. And also, I think my own confidence grew as well when I realized that I could be of help to her too. So yeah, for me, mentorships or mentor-mentee relationships are just so invaluable.
That's great. I love what you said about the mentoring relationships being a two-way. You learn things about yourself, even if you're being a mentor. And I totally agree. That's great. That's great. Maruska, how have mentors impacted you?
I was very lucky. I was extremely lucky because I had a number of mentors starting from very early age until today. I still have them. I'm being mentored by my superiors in my work in the UN on a regular basis. I get advice from people all over. And all these people, I mean, including especially the ladies who played an instrumental role in me selecting my PhD studies and the topic and see my career as it is. And some of them are on this call, and I hope they know how grateful I am for their advice always and support. But I see the value of mentor not just in the professional setting. This person also gives you a very personal advice, which comes from a neutral person, from a neutral ground that is not directly affected as a friend or family, and you can listen with a more clear vision. And that helps a lot because it shows you what your strengths are and what you have to improve. So it's this very healthy relationship of always support, but realistic. Like, this is what you have to work on. They call you out when you do something that is less than what you're capable of. And with people like me, or that was necessary sometimes. It can be frustrating, but incredibly rewarding at the end. And because of that, I was kind of hoping to give that back to someone. I'm one of the UN-USA Space for Women network mentors, and I'm mentoring two young ladies who are both students and coming from policy background as well. And it has been incredibly rewarding. They taught me so much. I don't even think they know how much I learned from them. So, yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And thank you so much for paying it forward. I think that's a theme that everybody's had, which is awesome. Susan, how has mentoring impacted you?
I think the very first time, without really realizing, was when I joined this group, when I first got into astronomy and outreach. We traveled across Africa, and amongst us, we had, professors, and we were undergrad or just thinking of where to go to as the Africans within the continent. And there was mentorship from that level, but also going to schools. We had young girls and boys write to us and say how much we've helped them. I didn't even know that that existed, because we were going to inspire young people, but we were also inspired by getting that feedback. And that, I think, was my first experience of kind of getting mentorship from different people. But now moving forward, we do go to schools, we work a lot with kids, we get them to mail us and to ask us. And now we have a space agency in Kenya, we have a degree program in astronomy. It's still young, but it's also nice to know when young boys and girls get in touch with us, especially the ones in high school who are thinking of what they want to do. We work with a lot of grad students from the degree program who serve as mentors, but we're also able to give them direction. And it's always, there's a lot out there that they find out and educate me about. So it's been very rewarding. I also want to say I've been mentored by excellent women and men. And it's always important for me to tell young girls that we have to work together. We're not trying to distance ourselves from men, because they are mentors, our fathers, and people in our careers don't necessarily have to be only women.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. That's a very good point. I think the other thing you mentioned that I would also articulate is sometimes your mentors could be younger than you. I've had a number of what we've called reverse mentoring engagements where I've had a younger generation actually helping me with technology. I wasn't born in the digital world, and so understanding how to leverage things like Zoom and other collaborative technologies has been critically important in some of the mentoring relationships that I've had. Well, great. I am going to change a little bit and ask you all to think about the future. So as we think about the future of space, what does the future promise that you see for the next generations, and what advice would you give them? So as we look towards the future, what does space promise for those next generations? Maruska, why don't we start with you this time?
My advice would be very simple. Don't let anyone tell you that you cannot do something. Take advice, trust that everything has to happen under the right circumstances and time, but do not accept no's. Don't let anyone tell you no. Do I see future as bright? Yes. I think my generation finally got timing of something right, and that is outer space and everything that has to do something with space, from exploration to finding resources, to going out there and seeing what's outside of our galaxy one day, hopefully. I think we got that right, and hopefully if we work together and with this idealism that we have to preserve it, it's gonna get us very, very far.
Great, thank you. Sian, what do you see as the future in space for the next generation, and what advice would you provide them?
Well, I think we're at the precipice of like a really exciting time for space exploration, certainly for my generation. We are just about to go back to the moon and to expose a whole new generation of people to the excitement of a lunar landing. And that's something that a lot of people just haven't experienced, probably don't even believe that it even happened even. And then of course, after we've been to the moon, then everybody's thinking about moving forward and going to Mars and setting up bases on Mars. So there's a lot coming in the near future. I think it's a really exciting time to be involved in the space industry, and will continue to be so for the next decades to come. There's going to be a lot of work that needs to be done to design all the vehicles and all the infrastructure that we need to get us there, and to do really valuable science when we're there, either on the moon or on Mars. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for people to work in the space industry in all sorts of different roles. In terms of advice, my advice would be to always to follow your dream, however crazy it might be. So if you dream of being an astronaut, as I did, then go for it, because even if you don't make it as an astronaut, it's going to take you on a really interesting and hopefully rewarding career path. So it's not the end goal that matters, really. Sometimes it's the journey that's more important.
That's great. Thank you. Susan, what do you see as the future of space?
I hope that, and I want to be optimistic that everyone can be part of the space industry and or exploration, irrespective of their background, the economic background or where they're from. I want a girl from rural Kenya to feel, irrespective of what career she chooses, that she can be part of that industry. I also want our people to feel that they belong. You know, if you're farmers, how are you benefiting from space exploration? How are you going to know how your yields are going to do, when you should be prepared? I just hope that we can understand better what benefits we have, and we can contribute more, irrespective of where we come from. And my advice would be, you know, this is a time, especially if you're young. This is your time to be part of space exploration, or just space, either within or out there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I agree with you. This is the time. This is the time. I think everybody's really excited about that. So you all have described some great futures of where we could go in space. And I firmly believe it will take all of us to make that happen. There is no one country, there's no one organization that's going to make that happen. So As we think about working globally and collaboratively together, what do you see as some of the challenges and what do you see as some of the opportunities in us working together in a collaborative manner? Susan, can I start back with you?
Yeah, I think we're not, I mean, with the internet, I try to tell young people that if you have access to the internet, you can learn a lot and not have to necessarily be somewhere. Even today, we're able to connect without necessarily having to travel to this one place. And there's a lot of interest to collaborate and to take advantage of that and to grow our networks basically as young people, and we should take advantage of that. I think like we just have a new we've just formed a space industry, the Kenya Space Agency, sorry. And we're very excited for the future. We're very excited to collaborate and to work with other more developed industries, but also pull other countries that are starting to set up theirs within the continent. And it's I think for me, very exciting to see the steps and things that are happening within Africa and what the future will be for us.
Yeah, I bet that is exciting to watch as the space agency grows there and the country grows as well. That's exciting. Thank you. Maruska, how about you? What do you see as some of the challenges and opportunities of us collaborating?
I think working with people is always challenging. I think if everyone is too similar, then you learn nothing. If everyone is too different, then you don't understand each other. I think the space sector is very diverse, and we are all coming from different countries, different backgrounds, different ages, genders, religions. You know, it's really a mix of people that can contribute to the success of this whole sector and field. I think that the fact that we have different backgrounds and these experiences doesn't, however, affect the fact that we speak the same language. We all love space. We all know it's important. We all look forward. And this is what matters. And because this is something that matters so much, this whole experience of working in the space sector is so rewarding.
Yes, it certainly is. And we do have that same love and vision and goal that we're all trying to achieve. And I think that will help us to come together. So that's great. Thank you with that. Sean, how about your perspective?
Well, I think in terms of opportunities, I think as you touched upon, Lisa, the space industry is really uniting the world together. It's a global endeavor. We go to the moon, in my opinion, not as Americans or as Europeans, but as humankind. And I really hope that that only gets stronger in the future, that, you know, more countries are working together, more space agencies are joining up to help us to achieve bigger and bigger things. And I think if we're going to Mars, then the more the merrier, right? We'll need ideas and we'll need support from everyone to make that happen. So I really hope that it's something that can really continue to unite the world. In terms of challenges though, money's always going to be a difficult one. Going to space isn't cheap. We need to find the most economical and the most sustainable ways of going into space and for making the best use of the resources and the things that we find there. So, and I think we also need to make sure that we understand that, like, people in the world understand why we're doing what we're doing, why it's worth it. We're not just going to the moon for the sake of it. We're going there to develop technologies, to learn, to perform scientific experiments that help us to understand our own planet and our own people much better. So that for me would be the biggest challenge.
That's great. Thank you. I appreciate it. Hey, Sean, you mentioned earlier Orion and it playing a role in taking the first woman to the surface of the moon, which is a part of the Artemis program, and very exciting that global program. We're really excited about the international partnerships we have on that as well. And as we think about women and going into space, I'm wondering, from what you've seen at the European Space Agency and as a female physicist and engineer, how do you think the female perspective can influence our space missions, our designs, and our facilities that we'll build for space?
I don't know, this always makes me think, when somebody asks a question like this, it makes me think of one of my favorite comedy sketches by Marcia Balsky, where she sings this song about poor Sally Ride and how she was asked by a male engineer back in the 70s if 100 tampons would be enough for her for 6 days in space. But, you know, that aside, I like to think we've come a long way since then. And I actually don't like to think that about the benefits of having just more women and what that will bring to the space industry. I like to think about increasing all types of diversity and really sort of exploiting that to make sure that we've got the very best solution to every mission that we're designing or every problem that we're facing. Because, like I said, we go to space as humankind. We're representing everyone from the whole planet. So in an ideal world, I think we'd be sending a representative sample of the planet up there into space to carry out these missions. So at the very basic level, that means kind of 50-50 men and women. And then, of course, you should have the same representation back on Earth amongst the scientists and engineers who are designing the missions. But really, I actually think we need to be thinking a bit beyond that. We need to be as diverse as possible in all sorts of ways. So gender, nationality, whether we're neurotypical or not even. All those sorts of things, because I think the more different minds and the more different types of minds that you have working on a problem, the better and the more robust your solution is going to be. And at the end of the day, engineering is just all about solving problems, right? So exploring space is a particularly tricky problem. So I think sometimes we need the best combination of minds attacking the problems from all different angles to make sure that we come up with the optimum solution that's going to bring the biggest benefit to everybody back on Earth.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. The diversity of perspectives, I think, is going to be keen here in terms of making sure that what we design and what we build can support all of us as we move forward. So thank you with that. Susan, your company is dedicated to promoting science and technology using astronomy tools like your telescope. From the experience you have in teaching students, what do you think is key to sparking the interest in space and science, especially for young girls?
I think that's an interesting question. From my perspective and why I take a telescope around, and we now have a planetarium as well. We've been taking a mobile one, and we've just built a permanent one out of bamboo. It's really, for me, I think it's giving young children options and sparking that interest. And I think astronomy does it very easily, because first, with the telescope, when we set it out there, even when it's cloudy, kids just want to look through the telescope. Like, it's this foreign, interesting, big thing that becomes the celebrity or the star of the day or night. Mostly it's the night. But then also just giving kids a chance, to have a lesson outside at night of the night sky, because that's a whole science lab out there, and there's so much they can look at, so much we know, so much we don't know, a room for them to question and room for them to think and find out and everything. And that's what we try to do, to spark that interest, to leave them wondering, hopefully to get them more excited about science and STEM with something they have access to, because the sky is up there for all of us, including young kids. So hopefully through the telescope or even the planetarium, taking them to this immersive world and giving them a chance to, learn about all these objects and feel like they're landing on the moon, for example, just gets them very excited and hopefully sparks that interest and gets them to want more. I'll just share a story. We once went to a very rural school with our telescope and planetarium. And this boy got into the planetarium, and afterwards he was like, I always thought scientists lied about stuff, but now I believe. But it was just that idea of experiencing this immersive world that made it feel real for him. And it stopped being a story of Saturn has rings. But when you see those rings, or when you kind of experience it in an immersive world, it kind of becomes true or real, and they want to explore that even more.
I think that's a great story. You can read about it in a book, but it doesn't really become real until you can see it with your own eyes. And what an exciting way to do that. Thank you for what you're doing. Maruska, you've served as a delegate to the UN Committee for Peaceful Use of Outer Space, and being a demonstrated history of working in the international affairs industry with a special focus on international space law and policy. Why are these topics so important to you, and what should the audience know about them?
Space is the only sector I can think of where everyone has to work together. There's really no other choice. We cannot reach the moon and not have music or books or art. Same with doctors, engineers, botanists, or historians that will record the life we had on Earth. I see this incredible life in this. It makes me feel alive that I have to work with other people to actually achieve something, that I am not here alone. It gives me a sense of purpose. This is why I chose to work in this field. This is why I decided on international relations in the first place, because I wanted to be a part of something large and what is bigger than outer space. Why I think these topics are so important, because we are so dependent on them. The fact that we can have this conversation today in 4 different countries is because of space technologies. The fact that I have a smartphone is because of space technologies. GPS, the fact that we are not getting lost anymore with maps and our fathers yelling at a car because we ended up in the middle of nowhere, even though we should just take a straight line. All these things, we are so dependent on space technologies, and we benefit from them on a daily basis. Disease control, agriculture, Earth observation. It's just out there. And I really liked, Sean, what you said before about explaining to people why this matters. And that's exactly it. When I was growing up, I didn't know these things. I thought it's for scientists and astronauts. In fact, it's for everyone. And this is a challenge and a beauty of this sector.
That's great. Thank you. I'm going to switch to some of the questions that we were getting online. Let's see, Susan, you talked about wanting to see people involved in space from every economical area. And there's a question that came in. I'll start it with you, maybe. What kind of tactical advice would you give a young woman from an underrepresented background to get involved in the space industry?
I think the fact that anyone could be part of the space industry is one of the messages we try to give kids, because it's nice to reach the kids who are already interested in science. And where I come from, it's also the inequalities. So in the cities, you might get schools that have all these facilities, but when you go to rural areas or get underserved schools, they might not have all these facilities, all these visitors. And the good thing about what we do is some of the schools we go to in rural areas have the best skies. And if we can connect our people with that sky, especially young kids, that's the beginning. And then also just trying to push the message across that you don't have to be an engineer or a physicist or an astronomer to be part of the space industry. You could be a lawyer and still be part of this industry. And it's big, it's massive, it's that you can contribute to this. So I think that's the message I always try to give young people, especially in underrepresented areas, and also just try to push for the fact that they can enjoy the sky without a telescope. And one of the things we really want to push is at least for every kid to have a chance to enjoy the night sky and have a lesson under the night sky, irrespective of whether they have a telescope or not, because there's so much they can learn that they do in their theory or in their textbooks that they would learn more with the night sky and get connection to it. Because we can't have elephants, for example. Some of the rural schools we go to are in remote areas with wild animals, and we always tell kids you can't have elephants or tomatoes without a planet, and you can't have a planet without a star. So we're really all connected, and it's important for us to take care of our home, our planet.
That's great. I love that. That's excellent. Thanks. Sian, you have had quite a career and have started as a physicist and now an engineer. So one of the questions came in specifically about how can someone who works as a mechanical engineer, do you have to be in the aerospace industry to get into space?
Not at all. I really don't think so. There are loads of different jobs in what I would call the space industry. I mean, taking from my own experience at Airbus, you know, we're not all engineers, we're not all physicists or scientists or mathematicians or whatever. We also need, you know, finance people, we need people in HR, we need project managers, we need schedulers, we need all sorts of different types of people. So I don't think that you have to have a background in space or even much experience of space to be able to contribute valuably to the industry. I think if you're excited by it, if you're inspired by the missions that are going on and you're passionate about it, then you'll be able to apply whatever experience and knowledge you do have to a role in the space industry. I think it's really quite broad and quite diverse. There's something for everybody.
Yeah, I would agree with you 100%. I can share from my own background that I did not start in the space industry. In fact, I've only been working in space for about the last 5 years. I will say it's very addicting and really excited to be in that area. But as somebody that has moved from other parts of industries and coming into the space industry, you can definitely make that shift and do it. Well, I'm sorry, but I think we're out of time for today. I want to thank you all for joining us, and I want to thank particularly our panelists. You shared some incredible stories and hopefully some inspirational stories for everyone that's been on the call, especially our young women and girls. And look for more exciting events highlighting women in space during the World Space Week of October 4th through 10th. And as Maruska said, there'll be other events that we'll have throughout the year as well. So ladies, thank you so much for participating. I've thoroughly enjoyed getting to know you better and appreciate you participating with us.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.